This is the sound of a trail.
Yo, what's up people? Wagwan fam. This is Atreyu coming through with the next video. Now this video is with Paul Kwashi, aka Sons of Ammon. He is a historian and a photographer, and he's been doing work for many years in many countries. 15 plus years he's been doing his research, traveling around the world. This is an hour-and-a-half interview, but I broke it down into 3 parts. The subject is Black America before Columbus. In this part 1, the topics include: who were the first people to live in the Americas? Where did they come from? Who were the Egyptians? He answers Michael Tessorian's claim that Egyptians could not be Africans because nowhere in Africa do you see the level of civilization. And he finds it funny that people compare Akhenaten to Obama in terms of facial features. Sons of Ammon goes into that. Did Egypt come from Africa or did it come from Mesopotamia? Who built the pyramids, the oldest pyramids? Who built them and where were they built? He goes into that. He goes into the Mayan culture, the Mayan civilization. Who were the Mayans? And also, who were the mother culture of the Mayans? Who the Olmecs are? Who were these people? So after you watch this, 2 things. I guarantee, like I'm Vince McMahon of The Rock, I guarantee 2 things. 1, you will see so much information that you did not know. Or 2, this video will further clarify information that you knew. With the visuals that I've got, along with the information, it will clarify everything that you already might have known. Don't be scared to pause the video, analyze the information. There's some written and there's a lot of pictures. I've put a lot of effort into this. You might need to come back and watch it again and do your research on the things that I said. Don't just look at a video on YouTube like it's all the truth. Do your own research into the things that I said and come to your own conclusion. But there's a lot of information in this video. Part 2 and 3, he shows his personal physical documentation, videos and stills. This is what he does. So he shows that in part 2 and 3, so that's going to be coming up. So comment, share, like, subscribe, all that stuff, man. Let me know what you think. Look out for 2 and 3 coming. And like I said, one more time, bless up. So just tell me, what is your name? What's your name?
Good question. Well, the Christian name is Paul, which I'm not a big fan of. But I prefer to go by the name of Ra, but at the same time, it's kind of difficult because there's a lot to live up to. Yes, Sons of Ammon, meaning sons of light, luminous ones, which relates to various religious so-called cults throughout the ages. Also, exemplifies or symbolizes that I'm into learning, and it's all about trying to be wise and righteous in this day.
Tell the people what you do.
I'm a student of learning in the sense of history. We know distorted that is. So, try to bring truth where there is false. Through that, obviously, one, get to the point where you have to do field studies, as we say. So that which means you have to travel to archaeological sites around the world, document them on video stills, and obviously do your academic studies on the matter at hand. I suppose I'm just a student of learning, and all this discipline we have to sort of get through. How would I describe myself? Is a follower of Ammon.
Okay.
Yeah. Or you could say Ammonite, or you can say I'm just a follower of the African traditional ways.
Oh, you said about doing field research. What countries have you actually been to? Not just for your archaeological stuff, but just in general.
Thailand, Cambodia, that's for Southeast Asia. Australia, I've been to India twice. Mexico, Guatemala. Spain about 6 times. Malta, Germany about 4 times. Been to Russia once, East Germany. Needless to say, I've been 1,000 odd times in Egypt. because this is where most of the field studies are based, and oldest and more plentiful, abundant. So, obviously I spend a lot of time there. Peru, been in Colombia, Bolivia. Hopefully I'll have the opportunities to do the rest of them I couldn't get to, like Belize and Ecuador and places like that.
You've been to Canada and America too.
Yeah, yeah,
So-
yeah. That's like family. It's a bit different.
I hear that, but you obviously know that they got a lot of stuff in those museums.
Yes, well, I made one attempt to go to Montreal. In Montreal, the Natural History Museum there is full of stuff, and the stuff there, it's like usually from what we don't know about. We know about the Folsom this a little bit, American history, but they also realized too black people living in the North Pole, what would become known as the Eskimos. And so there's a lot of stuff there, and if you look at a lot of the totem that the so-called Native Americans have got, you'd find that there's always at the bottom, there's always black progenitors at the bottom. So and then if you look at the physical evidence, then you get to know why they call them redskins and not nothing else. If you look at pictures from the early, well, let me say late 18th century to the 19th century by certain photographer Edward Curtis, for instance, you'd notice that a lot of the Indians are black, not even brown skin or red skin, but black skin. And that's something they don't talk about much. But even growing up, watching the Westerns, I've all had a certain affiliation for the Indians. And obviously, it's because it's in the blood. You feel certain sympathy for them, but you don't quite know why. Yeah, and well, I used to get very upset back in the day, but now I understand why. And most of my peers, I hope they understand why too. But somehow I doubt that, but I hope so. One must live with a hope.
We've got people making a lot of claims that people, what we call black, was in America way before slavery.
That's true. That's true. That's evidently true. And if we're talking strictly speaking scientifically, that's true because the Mississippi mound builders, for instance, right? We know when you see the actual artifacts of what they bring from the ground, they're actually pretty black. And when I say black, I'm talking about West African blacks. This is what they look like. We know about the Omlek. And if you actually go to the Yucatan region and look at what we call the Mayans, you'd see the Mayans are offspring of black people, really, right? So either way that you look at it, it's very hard to get away. And then, as I said, when you look at most native Indians, even throughout the 19th and 18th centuries, they were still pretty black, right? They were still pretty black. As I said, you mentioned the name the Flying Cloud. If you actually see a portrait of the Indian named Flying Cloud, he's actually what we would term mixed race today, but pretty dark. And I've got portrait painted, right, that show this man, right? So, as I said, when they say native, it's not quite correct. But because I think it's something to do with the fact that Western Europeans wiped out these people, and they feel some guilt at the end. So that to attribute something to them, right? But if we're talking scientifically speaking, America prior to slavery was black, during slavery was black, and after slavery was black.
The oldest pyramid is in Mexico. Is that true?
Well, if that is true, scientifically speaking, that is not been sort of published or publicized because the oldest pyramid is the one we know that called the Pyramid of the Sun, right? And that's in Timanako. I was there myself, and that's 1200s, 1200 AD. It's not that old. And if you actually look at what they built the pyramid with, the material that was around, you'd see it's not that old.
North and Northeast Africa, are they the oldest pyramids on the planet as far as what we have to look at today?
Well, as far as we know, scientifically speaking, the oldest pyramid is just outside of Giza, and that one was even built before Saqqara. So, and but people would say it's not a true pyramid
Why is that?
because it's more often 2 or 3 stage, and I think at some point it wasn't either completed or some kind of disaster wrecked it. So it was like it remains sort of somewhere unfinished or somewhat unfinished.
What was that pyramid called?
Pyramid of Dashur.
That's short.
Yeah.
Before we get on back to the miracle, one thing about that, I don't know what to call him. I guess he's kind of a historian or an activist. He's Irish, and he talks a lot about Irish foundation of civilization. I can't remember his name. He works a lot with David Icke and Jordan Maxwell on that. He was on the radio and they was talking about Afrocentric people who are claiming Egypt to be African. And what he said in that interview was that when we look in Africa, there is no evidence that they was able to build structures like the pyramids. So why would it be built by Africans when nowhere else on the continent do you see anything like the pyramid? Is this factual?
Well, obviously, if you're talking scientifically, it cannot be. The reason why things have not, for instance, lasted in the west of Africa, for instance, is because the climate is not agreeable for that. And secondly, is because Islam and Christianity demolished whatever they encountered, whatever black civilization or cities that were in Africa. Like Moro, for instance, where the last like Taraka, like Pionki, and so forth. These people, the pyramids that were built, out of the hundreds that were there, I doubt there's about 50 now. And this is in Sudan itself, because there was during the early 19 and 1800s, a lot of Europeans just basically pissed on these pyramids, and UNESCO had to actually try and preserve what was left. If you look at other parts of Africa, Lalabella, you're seeing the great quality of work that was done with the church, the cross, right? Now, if you look at Oxum, if you look at the stele in Oxum, I mean, the one that actually fell down, or one of the ones that fell down, was actually, as I said, over 70 meters. So, Lord only knows how many tons that was, right? Then if you look, there's another thing a lot of people don't talk about, is the Christian Nubians that were destroyed by the Muslim and Christian between the 12th century and the 1500s, right? There were churches there that actually, as I said, proper walled cities that was destroyed.
Where is this in Sudan?
This is in Sudan that no one ever talks about.
Is this North or South Sudan?
Well, it's basically from all of Sudan, because we're talking from Khartoum right up to what we call modern day Ethiopia today. Yeah. There was a civilization there of Christians, Sudanese, which Saint Maurice was a part of.
Saint Maurice.
Yeah. You've heard of that saint,
Yeah.
right? He's a patron saint of Germany, right? And as I said,
What year was he alive?
1300s. In Uganda, where mines of where you make iron, for instance, that were at a level that were higher than Europe's. In other words, they were getting to like 17,000 degrees, which is only recent times they've been able to do that in Europe. So, and if you look at the old waxing pottery, it's like an old style that is like what you see in Peru, West Africa, done by the Yorubas. And this kind of style is obviously superior to what we have today. But as we know, the style is, they say the technique is lost. Through the climate in Africa, some archaeologically is not suited for preserving things, but certain things have survived. We know castles were built all over Africa at one stage. The castles that you come to know as castles are African, because the oldest one is in Sudan, right? And that was done in the 18th century. Yes.
So are you saying?
No. Scientific facts are.
Wait a minute, wait. So you just said it's done in the 18th century, though. So what?
No, 1800 BC.
BC.
Yeah.
So in Africa, BC, as in before the common
Before
era,
Christ,
or
yeah.
before Christ,
Yeah.
there was castles.
Yes.
The same castles we'll see in England right now.
With molten water, the lot, drawbridge. And if you don't believe me, all you gotta do is go to the Aswan Museum and you'd see one there.
Were these castles built by white people?
No.
The Knights of Templar, did they build the churches in Ethiopia?
Nope. Because they never got that far.
This historian that I was talking about, who also goes on record for, you know, type of people, oh, I'm exposing the New World Order and all that, them sort of people.
Right.
The Irish guy. Why would he say that there's no evidence of structures like that existing in Africa?
Because in West Africa, one, they know the climate is not agreeable. Second, they knew that what was there was destroyed deliberately, systematically, so they could turn around and talk shit like they do now. And for instance, what he should have said, how come there's African buildings in Ireland? How come there's African culture, religion in Ireland that he does not address, right? The so-called Bangle Lady of York, right? We know Celts and all of this, right? We know Celts. We know Kinef of the 10th century. The three so-called district in Scotland, the Moravian people. We know all these people were black. Now, we know that the word gypsy derived from the word Egypt. And why didn't he talk about Sota, right? Why didn't he talk about Hedad? These are like kings of Norway, England, and Denmark, right? Scotland, the Alta Hebrides.
Did you just say the word gypsy comes from the word
Egypt, yes. 1700s, that was done by Macritchie and many other great scholars, white European scholars at the time. There's a term for black in the 16, 17, 18, and even like the 15 and 14 century in England. That's the name they were called black people here. The castle in Gondowa, that's like 16th century. Between the 12th century and about the 17th century, there's a lot of massive building in what we call modern Ethiopia today. And that's because of wars and victories that's not often explained properly or go into any depth, right? But this was like the building golden age.
Would you say that Egypt is an extension of a civilization which stretched across the whole Nile Valley, or did Egyptian civilization come from Sumeria and outside of Africa, in your opinion?
No, and it's not our opinion. We're going on scientific facts here, right? Egypt, what we call Egypt, has always been black and always remain black. First of all, even before there was a first dynasty, there was at least 12 kings in the Sudan who went up there and make Egypt what it is. Even in the time, right, which is around, we're talking about 325, Alexander time, right? Egypt remained black because they talk about the people they met there and they describe what they look like in various ways. Remain black. If you look at the pictures, right? If you look at the image, they remain black. Now, even when you look at the mummies, they remain black. And in fact, when Sheikh Anta Diop do the dosage melanin test, it proved the point. And that's why we're even not allowed to see mummies and shit today. The dosage melanin test is basically, right, the melanin that's in between the derm and the epidermis, right, of the skin, right? And the number or the actual percentage of melanin in those mummies prove that they're black, not only black, like West African type of black. Melanin is like a chemical that's responsible for your color, responsible for your thinking, in actual irresponsible for you being whoever you turn out to be. Because at the conception of birth, if that does not take place, you will come about. There will be no fetus.
So are you saying that the original population of Egypt had high melanin then?
Yep. So they look no different from no West African or Western Sudanese today. The mountain of the moon and the Rift Valley area, and made their way up through the Sahara. When the Sahara dried up, they came across into Egypt, what we call the Nile Valley today.
Is Ethiopia the grandmother of Egypt?
When they say Ethiopia, not the Ethiopia or the Abyssinia we think of today, no. It meant, when they say Ethiopia, they meant all of Africa.
Even when Dr. Ben said that?
Yeah, he meant all of Africa because he know up until the 1800s that region was called Abyssinia and it was a Muslim state for most of his history or modern history. That's why there was a lot of fighting went on that nobody really seems to care to go into.
Fighting between who?
Between the Christians and the Muslims for supremacy of that country. And it's only Menelik II in the 18 and 1900s why they get the upper hand. Prior to that, it was the 1200s when they overthrew the Zagwe that was there for 500 years before them, meaning the so-called Jewish ruling class or Aksumite.
The same people that we find in Ethiopia and Sudan and Uganda right now, were they the original people that migrated to Egypt and built that civilization?
Well, to some degree, yeah, because the Ek in Uganda still speak Middle Egyptian today, right up to this point. Now, those on what we call Ethiopia today, it varies a bit because they've had Muslim and Christian infiltration within their societies, right? So they're more mixed.
What do you mean by Muslim and Christian? You mean different races or blood?
Well, different races, blood, Christians. We know the Christians at this point were predominantly Western Europeans. Muslim, we know they were like Western Europeans with a mixture of Saudi Arabians, us, right? So, you know, the thing was a little bit more volatile, the race mixing.
They have certain look that they have today. Some are very dark, darker than you, and some are lighter than me.
Yeah. That's because of the mix,
Okay.
Christian and the Muslim influence.
I just want to get a shot of that picture next to you that you took yourself.
Yeah. Well, this shows what the original Egyptian looked like. That is Osiris, and this picture is a 10,490 years old, which was found next to his tomb by the French archaeologist and historian. Osiris is the original Christ of our African traditional religion. This is Christ, Savior of the world. This is Christ. What we know as Christ today is a poor copy of this.
If Egypt was built by outside people, why would they look the way this statue looks? I don't understand. Are they dark-skinned white people with black features?
Not such thing. That's not possible. You know why? Because then Africa and that part of Egypt is always like 100 degrees or more. And you will not survive in the heat. As you see today, even the modern day Egyptian cannot survive in the heat. He or she comes out at night. And even then, it's too much for them, right? So that tells you they're not suited or belong to the environment. When you actually go to Egypt and you go to a place like Luxor and Aswan, it's very easy to see that the indigenous people are black. And when you go there, they actually tell you that themselves, right? In fact, when I go to that country, I do get, are you from here? Are you from here? And I know why they ask that. They ask me, am I from Egypt or Sudan? They tend to call me Sudanese because I've got the features or the penal type of what they call Sudanese or sub-Saharan Sudanese. Yeah? Because you got the Khartoum type, which is more likely to have been mixed, and you got the sub-Saharan type, which is what we sprang from, which is less mixing. But there again, as time go on, that seems to be a little bit more harder to, basically to say, yeah, well, it's pure race. It's like in the past, the race used to be homogeneous, but that is changed. And God has done that in his or her wisdom. So that's how it is.
So if the oldest pyramids are in Africa, and there are pyramids in Asia and America, who built those ones?
Right. Well, that's simple. Because first of all, the pyramids at Giza Plateau is one of the oldest. As for the pyramids in Mexico, that was done by the 25th dynasty. We're talking about 700 BC. The one in La Venta that was destroyed in the 50s by the greedy Americans looking for oil in the Gulf of Mexico. That one was a bit older, but that was more of mud brick. That wasn't so much stone.
So when people say the oldest pyramids are in Mexico or in the Americas, what
They're
they
talking rubbish. They're talking about mounds, or they're talking about dirt pyramid. That's not a real pyramid. Real pyramid are stone.
what is a mound?
A mound is just a heap or a burial ground where we used to bury our ground. We'd make like a heap before we bury our dead.
So is the oldest mound in Mexico?
You'd be unwise to say such a thing. People have been living in Mexico and around that region for at least 100,000 years. In Africa, they've been,
Did you just say 100,000 years?
yes, yeah.
Wait a minute. I thought the people in the Native Americans, didn't they get there through the Barren Straits from Mongolia
Well,
after the Ice Age ended?
yes, but those were Indians, and those get there late in the history of America.
Was it around 16,000 BC?
It's around 8,000 BC. Yes,
But
this
you
is
just said
correct.
humans lived in there.
Yes,
for
because there
100,000.
was there those black people there before that. Those people mix with us to become what we call the modern Indians today.
So the so-called Native American or
It's not native. It's not native. And if you look at the historical books or scholars that were dealing, scientists that were dealing with that at the time, 18 and 1900s, they make it quite clear. In fact, there's a book called Men Out of Asia. And he makes it quite clear that the people they found in America and the oldest people in America were Aborigines, like what they found in Australia.
One thing I want to say about that as well, I did watch a documentary, I think it's called The Journey for the First Americans. And they found the skulls and they was just, then apparently they were shocked because these were Negroid.
Yeah.
And when they done, one thing you probably won't, I don't know if you agree with though, they said that these people that they found, not only were they, obviously you agree that they were the first inhabitants there, and what they were saying that the so-called Native American that we have in today's modern era, they migrated from the north and they actually went to war and nearly wiped out the so-called black Negroid type that was there before them.
happened. But it's not, I wouldn't say wipe out. In certain parts of America, that's almost true. Right? But there was so much black people there. The Indians, they wipe out some of them in the north, intermingle, bred, do that, because as I said, at some point, the Indian needed us to survive, right? And he realized that, right? But as for instance, when you look in Brazil, right, around what, 13 to about 7,000 BC, 7,000 BC, you'd find that they had little wars between the blacks and so-called native Indians, So yeah, there was wars. Whatever proof is that the stone, as I said, the totem, right, and the actual some of the artifacts and masks, or they actually dig up from the ground archaeologically, is proved that quite clearly. At Baffin Island, they found like 900 and something bodies, and they were all black people. Yeah.
Maybe they was taken there after slavery.
No. These were like there before the 16th, right, to the 12th century AD. They've been carbon tested. Even black people conquered the North Pole too. And if it wasn't for that, the Eskimo would not look the way it does, because even today they still have black Eskimos in Greenland. In fact, when Eric and them made the expedition in 1906 or 1908 somewhere, they found, when they went to Greenland for the first time in modern times, they found black Eskimos there. And the pictures that they've taken proves this.
Black Eskimos.
Yes, I've got pictures of a few myself. It's necessary to be able to stand up on your own feet when called for, and this is one of the things I do.